You know that feeling, right? When you hear someone speak a foreign language and their accent is just flawless. It's pretty impressive. Take the Italian soccer star Federico Chiesa. After a big tournament, he did an interview in English, and suddenly nobody was talking about the game. They were talking about his accent. And that kind of kicks off this whole fascinating question about why we're so obsessed with perfection.
And get this, a study from Ca' Foscari University put it perfectly. They said his accent was so good, it was like Italy had beaten England twice. It really highlights this thing we do, where we see a perfect accent not just as a skill, but as this amazing, almost competitive victory.
But this whole obsession, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Why are we so hung up on this native speaker ideal as the ultimate prize? And maybe more importantly, in a world that's all about connecting with people, is chasing that kind of perfection totally missing the point? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into.
All right, so to get to the bottom of this, we're first going to put accents under a scientific microscope. We're going to dive into a really detailed study that looked at exactly how and why specific pronunciation habits pop up when Italian speakers start learning English.
So this study from Hawaii Pacific University didn't mess around. They weren't just guessing. They systematically recorded and analyzed 27 Italian learners of English to basically create a map of their most common, most stubborn pronunciation issues. The goal was simple: find the patterns.
So how'd they do it? It was actually pretty clever. Every single person in the study read this exact same passage out loud, and the text itself is the key here. It's known as the Stella passage, and it's basically a linguistic obstacle course designed to make you use nearly every distinct sound in North American English, a perfect tool for finding errors. And the results were fascinating. The mistakes weren't random at all. They were incredibly predictable. For consonants, that buzzing Z sound often turned into a sharp S sound, so P's would sound more like peace. And yep, those famously tricky TH sounds in words like these and things, they almost always became a harder D or T sound.
So the big question is, why these specific errors? Well, the main culprit is something linguists call L1 interference. Think of it this way. Your brain is wired for your first language, your L1. It knows those sound rules inside and out. So when you learn a new language, your brain tries to use the old rulebook on the new game. And when the rules don't match, you get these very predictable errors.
Here's a perfect example to make this crystal clear. Take the word sleep. In English, that S is just, well, S. But in Italian, there's a rule that says if an S comes right before an L, you have to add a little buzz to it, making it a Z sound. So what happens? An Italian learner's brain, running on its native software, will predictably say "zleep." It's not a lack of effort. It's just a conflict in the programming.
Okay, so that leads to the obvious question, doesn't it? If these are just old habits from your first language, then surely just moving to an English-speaking country for a few years should fix it. You just immerse yourself, and your brain overwrites the old rules, right?
Well, the study looked into that exact idea. They compared the number of pronunciation errors each speaker made to how long they had actually lived in an English-speaking country. And the stats they got back were pretty surprising.
Get this, even for the group that had lived there the longest, the correlation was only negative 0.3718. In statistics, that is a really weak connection. The takeaway here is massive. Simply living somewhere, even for decades, does not automatically give you a native accent. It's a huge language learning myth, completely busted by the data.
So if immersion isn't the magic bullet, what's really going on? To understand that, we have to shift gears. We need to move from the technical what of these errors to the psychological why. We need to get inside the learner's head.
And for that, we're circling back to that second study from Venice. This time, researchers surveyed 372 language students, but they weren't listening for mistakes. Nope, they were asking about feelings, about goals, and about what these students truly believed about having an accent. And the results were, wow. Just look at this. When asked if they wanted to sound as close to a native speaker as possible, over 95% of them agreed or strongly agreed. This isn't just a casual wish. For the vast majority of learners, this is a powerful, deeply held goal.
But here's where it gets really complicated. The study found this deep internal conflict. Nearly 40% of those same learners admitted that hearing a marked foreign accent in other people actually annoys them. Think about the pressure that creates. They're not just aiming for perfection themselves, they're judging others by that same tough standard.
So what does this all tell us about the learner's mindset?
It shows that this desire for a native-like accent is tied up in some really powerful emotions. It's about the pure pleasure of speaking well, feeling more confident, getting that social validation when someone mistakes you for a native. But at the same time, despite all these strong feelings, they're incredibly uncertain about how to even measure their own success.
So, we have this image of language learners desperately chasing this ideal of a perfect native accent. But here comes the big twist. While the learners are all running in one direction, the entire field of linguistics is starting to run in the other.
Yeah, that's right. The academic world, the people who actually study language and create teaching methods, are fundamentally rethinking what the goal of pronunciation should even be. That old native speaker ideal is no longer the undisputed champion it used to be.
What we're seeing is a huge philosophical shift. It's a move away from the nativeness principle, this idea that the goal is perfection and an accent is a flaw to be erased. And it's a move towards the intelligibility principle. Here, the goal isn't to sound like a native, it's simply to be understood. Your accent isn't a flaw, it's a feature, a part of your identity as a multilingual person. The focus shifts from perfection to pure communication.
And this brings us full circle, right back to that first study. Remember that Z to S error, where peas sounds like peace? The study found it was one of the most stubborn errors, even in advanced speakers. And now we know why. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It almost never stops people from understanding what you mean. The errors that don't block communication are the ones that stick around.
This new focus is perfectly captured by this idea called English as a lingua franca, or ELF. Let's be real. The vast majority of English conversations in the world today are between non-native speakers. A business person from Italy talking to a colleague from Japan. A tourist from Brazil asking for directions in Germany. In those situations, nobody is a native speaker. The only thing that matters is that they can understand each other.
So this leaves us with a final, crucial question for learners and listeners alike. Is an accent really a flaw that needs to be fixed and erased? Or is it simply a feature of your unique linguistic journey, a part of your identity to be owned, as long as you can make yourself understood? The answer to that might just change the way we think about speaking altogether.